You had told me I would be making this video back in July, I probably wouldn't have believed you. That's because I have very little faith in powerful people being held accountable. But it looks like Dan Wootton is fleeing to Scotland. Sorry, Scotland. From Tom Latcham of Bylinetimes, exclusive, Dan Wootton's departure from GBNews has been, quote, held up by legal matters, according to sources. But Bylinetimes can confirm the journalist has put his house on the market with plans to move to Scotland, suggesting he has accepted he will be axed from the channel. From what we've heard, the writing has been on the wall in that the plan was never to bring Dan back into the fold. Remember, one of the co-founders of GB News wants to buy The Telegraph, and he needs to look like a more respectable media entity. Here's what's important to remember about this. This was not just a story that Bylinetimes broke in a week. They had been working on this for at least 3 years, if not more. And they have consistently delivered with their content and brought the receipts. So much so that it appears that their dossier is the reason the Met Police is actually going to investigate the alleged crimes against Dan Wootton. I believe in the power of good journalism, power of journalism that gives us a check on power, that delivers the news we need to know, the facts we deserve to know. But in order to do that, you need the time and the space to really dig in and research these stories. It also costs money, which is not something a lot of newsrooms have to spare, and an overhaul of the entire system. If you're driven by oligarchs and people who are just interested in how much money they are going to make and not the actual tenets of good journalism, you're going to get what we're getting now in most cases. So scabbers might be out of the picture. That doesn't mean there aren't serious structural issues that need to be dealt with in order for another Dan Wootton not to rise to power. Dan Wootton shouldn't have even been in the position to buy an expensive house that he is selling now. He should have been axed decades ago. What is it about the news environment that lets someone like Dan prevail? One of the more recent articles from Bylinetimes is into the threats sent by Dan's lawyers to major publications that caused them to retract their story on Bylinetimes, breaking the news that there was an investigation into Dan by Met Police. The article states they need to find a way to better protect publishers from junk lawsuits and litigation, have people like Dan go through an independent body instead of targeting newsrooms, pointing to the fact that this is much bigger than Dan Wootton. It doesn't mean we can't enjoy sweet, sweet karma in the meantime. What else is Bylinetimes up to? Well, they have a new investigation out. New series titled Confessions of a News of the World Reporter Whistleblowing for Prince Harry. This woman worked for News of the World during some of the time frames that Prince Harry says News of the World hired private eyes or hacked phones, etc., to listen in on his conversations, get information that they could post about him. Many of these dates from when he was just a kid. This first piece is really about the cutthroat world of News of the World. Recall, Dan Wootton first worked for this paper. Piers Morgan was the editor. So had Rebecca Brooks and Andy Coulson, her deputy. Not the moral figureheads you want at your paper, unless you don't care about ethics. But what really has me interested is what is promised in part 2. Quote, I reveal how I worked on a dodgy front page story about Prince Harry in a long-running and desperate attempt to link the teenage royal to cocaine. I have done a lot of research into this and the role that Mark Boland played in this story as well. I am very excited to see what she has to say and then bring to you all of the information and receipts that I have to hopefully paint a clearer picture. I will have more on that and any more news on Dan Wootton as it comes in. Happy Friday.